Over there.
If you've been on the fence about Code Vein, that's understandable. On the surface, it looks like it's just another action RPG in the vein of Dark Souls. No pun intended. However, being a fan of action RPGs that take after that certain game series, I decided to give it a go. I waited a bit for a price drop since I jumped on the surge when it first released. Yeah, fool me once. Code Vein takes the foundation from Software set and makes a game with anime-inspired vampires. If you are not familiar with this particular genre, it's essentially a third-person hack-and-slash adventure game with RPG-style leveling and customization. That's a broad overview for sure, but I feel that for most people that would be a serviceable description. There is one additional detail though. These types of games are typically difficult. Code Vein follows in the tradition of slower, methodical combat that is manageable one-on-one, but when facing multiple enemies, the difficulty can really ramp up. Where Code Vein starts to set itself apart is the story. Fans of this genre are used to having to really dig into the environment and item descriptions to piece together a story, but Code Vein puts the story front and center. There is dialogue and cutscenes aplenty. At some points, it can get to be a bit too much. Throughout the game, you do collect memories called vestiges, and you have to have them restored. This involves an interactive cutscene followed by some lengthy dialogue. At first, it's a nice break, and the extra story is welcomed, but by the end of the game, I found loads of these things, and I found myself skipping through the cutscenes. I did miss out on some backstory, which I do regret, but I had about 10 of them to restore, and I really didn't feel like sitting through 10 of these interactive cutscenes. So additionally, the game does give you a AI partner, of which you can swap out for a different one if desired, for the entire game, by the way. This is both good and bad. The good is that the AI partner does offer dialogue during exploration, which can help add more character to the game, and they can point out items and enemies. I enjoyed having an AI partner, and I felt it really added to the fun of the game. However, if you are looking for a challenge, the AI partner, it's not going to be your friend. You see, they are very skilled in combat, and they're very intent on keeping you alive. So each enemy encounter usually starts with them giving you a buff, and if you die in combat, some of them can also heal you and bring you back to life, but it does diminish the challenge a bit. But luckily, you can go at it alone if you want a harder game, which I do plan on doing for my next playthrough. My first time though, I decided to play the way the developers wanted, which was with a partner. Code Vein does a great job of keeping you invested in the story as well as pulling you forward. You are never too far away from a missile, which is their version of a bonfire if you're familiar with Dark Souls, and that acts as a save point. It made me feel like I had more freedom to explore without worrying about losing my experience points because if I died, it was usually just a short run back to them. If I ever was exploring and felt like I was getting too far from the missile, I would just turn the corner and there's a new one, or a shortcut back to an older one that I'd already found previously so I could save and upgrade my character. The centerpiece of the action RPG is the combat. Code Vein feels very good to play. The button layout is different from the, quote, standard set by other entries in this genre, which does take some time to get used to, but after about an hour it became second nature. You get a small arsenal of weapons to try out from swords, spears, hammers, and guns, and they all feel great to use, and mastering them requires practice. You can load up 2 weapons and swap them out on the fly, which can greatly help when exploring the environment. Now I swapped between a one-handed sword and a two-handed sword, which is not very imaginative, I know, but it is how I like to play. I became very proficient in swapping them at the right time during combat depending on my situation. When the weapons hit, there's also a satisfying sound and animation that really never got old. I'll tell you, the combat feels great. But the combat does fall apart a little bit in that it never seems to feel quite as tight as I'd like. So it's kind of treading that line of it feels really good, but there's just something missing. There are times when you want to break animation and roll or change attacks and the game just doesn't respond the way that I expected it to. And if I accidentally tap the roll button twice, the character is going to roll twice, not allowing any sort of cancellation, which I've become accustomed to in other games with this genre. Same with sword swings and other commands. I had to learn not to try and load up commands in anticipation that I may need to cancel and just do one move or command at a time. This took a while to get right, but I soon got used to it. By the time I had completed my first run through Code Vein, I was ready for the story to wrap up. It certainly didn't overstay its welcome, but it ended at the right time. It was just starting to feel like the playtime was being extended for the sake of a longer game when you're finally thrust into the final battle, which does come with a nice difficulty spike, by the way, so be prepared for that. The game is a fun new take on the genre that I had a lot of fun with and plan to revisit. So if you're on the fence as to whether you should buy Code Vein, I say go for it. As mentioned before, it's fun, and at the end of the day, that is why we play games.
You're awake then? Whoa, keep it down. Your friend just fell asleep.